Okay. Good evening again, guys. Sorry about this, about having someone unfortunately on having their volume on and we could hear everything they were saying. But it's not a problem. I will just record this and send it out to you guys in a few minutes. This is not a very long lecture. Week seven's quiz is only 10 questions long. It's from the handouts, the videos that are attached to the handout, and this lecture. So just like last week, our um, lecture today is a very sensitive subject to many people. What we'll be discussing today is only one aspect of geriatrics, and that is dementia. Okay, geriatrics is the branch of medicine that deals with the problems and diseases of old age. Alzheimer's disease and dementia are related, but they are not the same thing. Dementia is an umbrella term that refers to a set of symptoms affecting memory, thinking, social abilities, and the such. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. So while Alzheimer's disease involves dementia, not all dementia cases are due to Alzheimer's. And you really need to understand there is a difference. Dementia is a broad term that describes an incline in cognitive functions, whereas Alzheimer's um, is a progressive brain disorder that leads to gradual loss of memory and thinking skills, and eventually the ability to carry out simple tasks. Um, Alzheimer's disease can progress to the point that a person can even forget how to swallow. So it is a very debilitating disease. According to UCLA Medical Center professor of psychiatry, Dr. Levetsky, approximately 2.5 million people in the US have dementia. Um, Personally, I find that kind of low. There's approximately what 334 million people in the United States. So 2.5 million of those 334 million is less than 1%. And dementia, you do not have to be old to get dementia. I mean, some people see effects of dementia in their 30s and 40s. So I personally think this number is low, and I'm sure this is probably due to undocumented cases. Okay, so that's probably why it appears that number is low. And approximately one half of those 2.5 million are 85 years or older. This statistic should not be a surprise, although there are many 85 to 100-year-old Americans who are very alert. Some of the indicators of dementia would include memory loss, difficulty concentrating, hard to carry out daily tasks. They have difficulty carrying out daily tasks. Another thing is repetition. They will repeat the same thing over and over. They will call the same person over and over. They struggle sometimes to find the right words to say. Um, they have confusion with time and place. They have difficulty with basic understanding. And also, they have mood changes. There's that Howie Mandel commercial that comes on TV where he jokes about people shouldn't tease about having OCD. Um, in my personal opinion, I think we shouldn't tease about having dementia either. It's a very debilitating disease. Now, the caregiver, the relationship between the caregiver and the parent in the event we're talking about a child that's taking care of their parent, it can be very difficult. And these are some of the emotions that the caregiver demonstrates or experience. Um, Stress, anger, um, fatigue, feeling of helplessness and hopelessness. They can be depressed. And I have personal experience with the disease as a caregiver. And I can tell you these emotions listed are valid. I would also add depression is on this list. You have a feeling of being inadequate. Your parents who have done things for you their entire life are now in a position where you need to help them. And it can be very, very hurtful. It can be depressing. Um, it can cause a lot of stress for the healthiest of caregivers. So, during this long, protracted period from diagnosis to death, um, it's often called the long goodbye because that slow, progressive nature of the disease, it robs that individual of their memory, of their personality, and their ability to function. It is very, very sad. And what happens is you have a tendency to see that person you have known your entire life and love that has cared for you get to the point where they lose themselves. They lose everything, but their physical presence remains. And sometimes it's for many, many, many years. It is very hurtful for a caregiver to have to care for someone with dementia. Now, here, these are some behaviors, and we have videos for each one of these in the handout that I posted that the patients experience. They can have aggressive language and behavior, and they can have inappropriate language and behavior. Repetitive phone calls and questions, they can be sexually inappropriate, that type of behavior. Um, Hallucinations. In one of the videos, there is a wonderful example of the hallucinations. It was just based on how things were set up in their room that they were hallucinating, thinking someone was in the room. They refused to take baths, they refused to take their medicine. Sundowners is they're confused, the confusion occurs in the late afternoon and into the night. Um, that can be very depressing to the caregiver. And wandering. Yes, wandering. Now, I want to discuss with you Dr. Winger at UCLA. Um, it is vitally important for everyone to get advanced directives. These are legal documents that provide instructions for medical care and only go into effect if you cannot communicate your own wishes. So the living will, your wishes are written into a legal document. And the durable power of attorney, your wishes are communicated to someone you trust that will follow through on your wishes if they become unable to make decisions for themselves. This is it's hard to talk about But it's something that we should all consider, even at the ages that we are now, because everyone is getting older, your parents, your grandparents. So therefore, you should consider having these conversations with members of your family. Other medical, legal, ethical principles in healthcare directly related to caregiving. The first four that you see with stars by them are the ethical principles of healthcare. First, there's justice, and this just refers to the principle of fairness and moral rightness in the distribution of benefits. So it is basically saying that everyone should be treated equally. Beneficence is the moral obligation to act for the benefit of others. So this is doing good and preventing harm. Non-maleficence, this is not to inflict harm, avoid negative actions. And then autonomy is the last. The principle of right, the principle or right for individuals to make their own choices and decisions without coercion or influence from anyone. Okay? But that's within reason if they are medically able to do that, to have autonomy. According to what Dr. Wegner's research, 50% of patients would rather die than be kept alive through a feeding tube. This is very sad, but it's true. This is why your primary care physicians usually recommend, again, that all patients have these advanced directives. And having a living will or durable power of attorney is how you do this. Having this conversation with your aging family members is not easy. But I hope you can see why it is 100% necessary for us to do. These are some current trends in caregiving. 50% of family caregivers have less time to spend with their spouse and children. Yes, taking care of someone with dementia, being a caregiver, takes up a lot of your time. 53% of family caregivers said caregiving increases their level of anxiety and stress. Yeah. The number of caregivers in the decade to come will continue to decline. People do not want to do this work. Even though it is very necessary, there are family members that don't want to do it. It is hard. 46% of family caregivers cite the physical and emotional demands of caregiving as an impact on their health. Can you imagine not getting enough sleep at night, getting up and down to go and care for your elderly family member while having a husband or wife and children and a job? It is very difficult. There will be a steady decline in the number of long distance caregivers. Those are people that drive back and forth. I have a coworker currently that lives here in Alabama whose mother is in her 80s that has dementia, but she lives in Georgia. I know that sounds wild, but yeah. Um, Fortunately, there is a wonderful, wonderful person that lives in their neighborhood that checks on her mother daily. She makes meals for her mother. She takes her to her doctor's appointments. But my colleague here, she works and she has a daughter that lives with her that have twins, one of which is ventilator dependent. So it's not like she can bring her mother to her. I mean, that would, oh gosh, that would increase the anxiety that she would have to go through having a mother with a dementia and a grandchild that is ventilator dependent. 51% of family caregivers say they suffer from mood swings and depression. Having to take care of your parents is hard because, first of all, your parents will always see you as their child. They'll always see you as their child. And so when you try to explain something to them and tell them you need to do this or you need to do that, they're like, "You're not my mother. You're not my father." So yes, having mood swings and depression is it's it happens quite a bit. 24.4% of adults aged 45 to 65 are caregivers, with more women taking on the formal role as caregivers than men. That might be true, but I do know there are lots of men that take care of their family members. Um, oh, there's the study guide, but I do want to say something else. Um, There are several different imaging modalities that are used to evaluate dementia. And I'm saying this because um, I think there's a question on this quiz that asks about what modalities should be used to assess dementia. The most common is probably MRI. It assesses the structural changes in the brain associated with dementia. CT, it identifies structural abnormalities like strokes and tumors and bleeding that can contribute to cognitive decline. There's also PET. It's used to observe metabolic activities in the brain. Um, Single positron emission CT or SPECT CT, it can detect regions where reduced blood flow are found in the brain. Functional MRI, they can detect changes in blood flow as well. And magnetic resonance spectroscopy, it measures the concentration of certain chemicals in the brain. So ultimately, the imaging modalities that we use um, to evaluate dementia, MR, CT, PET. Um, and you have the study guide. It was in the announcements. I went ahead and put the link for you guys. There is a Kahoot for you to study for your final, which is going to be next week. And I do believe your final should be completed by next Friday, not Sunday, but Friday. Not exactly certain. I don't have a calendar right here in front of me. I will look and I will make certain. And you guys can look at your schedule and your calendar and find out exactly when that day is. This Kahoot has 90 questions on it. You can play it solo. Um, but I think your final exam, I'm sure your final exam has 100 questions on it instead. Does anybody have any questions for me? If you do, you guys know how to get in touch with me. Again, I'm sorry about the disturbance, and I just had to record your lecture tonight instead of having a live lecture with you. Um, if you have any questions, you know how to get in touch with me. Send me an email. You can text me. You guys have my number. Um, it is, I think, in the first announcement, welcome to the class. I think my actual cell phone number is there. So if you have a question, you can send me a question and I'll be more than happy to answer it for you. All right, guys, thank you again for being so wonderful. I cannot believe there's only 1 week left. Okay, Take care. Have a good evening.